So, have you ever lain awake at night wondering to yourself, what if everything that I've built, everything I've worked so hard to achieve, came crashing down? What if there was a new law that came out, or someone sued me, or suddenly I had to declare bankruptcy because there was fraud committed in my business? What would happen? And what would happen to my assets? What would happen to my family? Would I be able to provide for them anymore? Would I have anything left? Well, if most of us as entrepreneurs are honest with ourselves, we've probably thought about this at least a few times and maybe way too many times. So, what I wanted to talk about today is the three different levels of protection available in three different types of investment accounts and how each one is guarded or not against creditors. And in today's Financial Prof episode, that's exactly what we're going to be talking about: asset protection. Hi, I'm John Norberg, and welcome to the Financial Prof series. So what happens if somebody sues you, right? And all of a sudden, now you have to pay out oodles and oodles of dollars, and possibly your business is gone and everything else. Again, this is a worst case scenario, and hopefully it never happens. But unfortunately, businesses, even big businesses, can go completely down the tubes for reasons that are, oftentimes no fault of the employees or even necessarily the owner, Enron, anyone. Now, there were a lot of people at fault in that one, but it's an example of how even the largest, most successful looking businesses on the outside can be quite a different story on the inside, right? So what happens as the business owner if you do end up getting sued and unfortunately a judgment is passed against you which says, okay, yeah, you actually do owe millions and millions of dollars? How are your different assets protected? Well, first and foremost, the business itself, which is a different type of investment, so we're not going to deal much with that. That has to do with how you've structured the business. LLC, S Corp versus C Corp. There are a number of different laws that apply there, and this is probably where, in addition to your financial advisor, you're going to want to ask your attorney about his advice on the best way to structure the business from a protection standpoint, right? But what we're going to talk about, again, is three levels of protection from an investment account standpoint, and that's going to be the 401k, the IRA, and the individual or joint account, right? So let's start with the 401k. Now, 401k, has the same level of protection typically as the 403b, 457, all of these for whatever they may be plans, typically fall under ERISA, which is the Employer Retirement Income Security Act, right? What that comes with is a suite of protections which were put in place to prevent, creditors, etc., from being able to claim the hard-earned dollars of the people who have saved oftentimes throughout their lifetimes for this money, right? So not only are 401ks safe from creditors, but they're also safe from bankruptcy typically. And there are only a few ways that money can really be forcibly removed from a 401k if you, as the owner, don't want it removed therefrom. A couple of examples would be if you have an ex-spouse and you've got to pay up based on a qualified domestic relations order or quadro. If you're on your second or third marriage, you might know exactly what I'm talking about. Another example would be that the IRS could decide to garnish your retirement plan based on unpaid taxes or debts owed to them. The federal government, if you are a federal criminal, can at times go after your 401k assets as well. But beyond that, it's darn near impossible to try to get assets out of a 401k if that 401k owner, aka you, don't want them coming out. So the 401, whatever, 403, etc. plans, very highly protected. That's at the top of our trio, right? Next, IRAs. Now, there are two types of IRAs, Roth IRAs and traditional IRAs, and they both have different types of protection levels depending on the state. So, for example, Alabama, great state, right? If you're an Alabama resident, you have full protection on both your traditional IRA and your Roth IRA. However, you do not have protection, let's just say in Georgia, on your Roth IRA. Georgia will protect your traditional IRA from creditors and bankruptcy, but it will not protect Roth IRAs for some reason. So maybe that will be updated in the future, but as it stands, and I have some very good friends in Georgia, you're going to want to be careful about any Roth IRA assets that you have if you're worried about this kind of thing. Now, Roth IRA and traditional IRA assets, while not necessarily protected from creditors, are still typically protected from bankruptcy, right? So if you go ahead and need to declare bankruptcy for whatever reason, a lot of business owners did have to end up doing that in the middle of COVID-19, right? Pandemic that no one saw coming, and the world changed dramatically. And in order to simply restructure, reorganize, different chapters of bankruptcy were declared by a number of different businesses. In that case, those IRAs in your name, even though you may be the business owner, are protected from bankruptcy. So again, that's the second level of protection, kind of in the middle of our pack, right? Finally, you have joint or individual accounts. So this is like your investment account, at whatever investment brokerage house you may choose to patronize, or with your financial advisor. This is going to be your least protected account. If it's a joint account, that is one thing to be aware of, is that there are several different types of joint account. There's joint with rights of survivorship, joint tenants in common, etc., etc., etc. And depending on how that joint account is structured, it may mean that that joint account, if indeed it is joint, is vulnerable based on the bad dealings of just one of those people on that account. So if you're married, and you're perfectly in the right, perfectly in the good, but your spouse ends up doing something to jeopardize your assets, it could mean that the whole account, even though you did nothing because that spouse's name is on there, could be liable, because there are very few protections outside of, again, other legal structures like LLCs, etc., on a joint account. So that's kind of the third level on our whole trio of protected accounts. So again, ERISA-sponsored plans, be that 401k, 403b, for whatever it is, are generally your most protected because of that ERISA regulation. Then you have the IRAs, both Roth and traditional. Depends largely on state regulations, so make sure you're aware of what your state's regulations are as far as protection from creditors. They are, however, typically protected from bankruptcy. And then finally, you have your regular investment account. This is your joint account, this is your individual account, that kind of thing, with very few protections. And this is, again, where you're going to want to be careful and certain of who is on that account. And this also applies, by the way, for properties which may be jointly titled. So let's say you hold an investment property with some siblings and you guys are joint tenants in common. You're going to want to be careful that those siblings you grew up with don't do quite the same kind of criminal stuff that they might have done to you as a kid, like, steal your snacks, whatever the case may be, right? We all have siblings, or at least if you do, you know what I'm talking about. So with that being the case, there is one more element that I want to talk about just briefly, and that is trusts. Now, you don't need to necessarily go and set up some crazy offshore living trust, etc., to protect assets, but that doesn't mean that the assets that you have outside of your 401k or your IRA are left completely at the mercies of the winds and anyone who might not like your services. Instead, there are legal structures which you can set up, and again, I'm talking primarily about trusts here, although there are different strategies, obviously, that will allow you not only to necessarily protect yourself, but also to potentially remove your name entirely from those assets, such that if someone does come after you, you might not even have any obligation to disclose, and they might not even know that it exists. So all of this to say that if you have some chunk of money or property or asset or business or set of investments that you have worked hard for, that you've built throughout your lifetime, that you're proud of and you want to make sure is protected both for you and potentially your family as well, then it's important to know what kind of protection is attached to those assets. And if you haven't looked into that, then let's have a conversation. In the meantime, I'll see you out there.